Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series. We take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the Tier 2 Tavern Adventure, Quite the Pickle, designed by Trevor Salla for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Now, I was about halfway through reviewing this adventure when I thought, gosh, this seems really familiar, like oddly familiar. It's got some really neat parts to it. There's a mimic that is not evil. It's almost like a pet that the tavern keepers have. And there's these brothers, dwarf like bodyguard brothers who are very piratey, and they've and taverny, and one of them is a were crocodile. And I thought this all feels very, the pickle thing. Spiced pickles is the big thing at this tavern. It just felt way too familiar. So I went through and I've reviewed tons of products by now. And I discovered that this was originally a single page adventure found in the Lonely Scroll Adventure Contest Saltmarsh, which I reviewed, I think about 2 years ago now at this point, which was a really excellent collection of single page adventures. Literally, the entire adventure was put on a page, and that was one that I had written down, and there was like 50 of them or something, and I had written down only like maybe 10 of them that I really enjoyed, and that was one of them. And what's cool is that the designer went on to turn that into a full-fledged adventure that is like 50 pages long on the DM's Guild. So neat fun fact there that originally began as a single page adventure in a compilation package. So the original adventure, as I mentioned, was on a single page, and it was basically just a series of events that happens at a tavern that are kind of fun and thematic, specifically for supposed to take place in Saltmarsh, but could fit any kind of dockside, classic pirate town tavern situation. It didn't have to be at Saltmarsh, but it obviously fits that one very, very well. It is technically for Tier 2. It's designed for level 8, although it has the average party level adjustments for every single encounter from what looks like from 5 to 10, so anything Tier 2. But that being said, it's still very light on combat. What this is, adventure may even be too strong a word, not that I am disparaging what this is, but it's really more of a series of events. Oh gosh, Eric, isn't any adventure a series of events? All right, hold on. In other words, there's no dungeon crawl here. There's nothing like that. It's not a traditional D&D adventure. Instead, all of these events that happen transpire in and around this tavern, which is kind of cool. And that means you could use this either as a flavor-filled building up of a tavern in Saltmarsh or whatever other tavern you've got. Or you could run it as, hey, you arrive at this town, and then here's all these events happening at this tavern. So either way, I think it would probably work really well if it was whatever your player's base, town is, their home of operations. If you expanded their tavern, assuming you're doing a pirate theme, which is why you're looking at this review, with these events, because that would be pretty effective. Now, the original adventure had 3 events. This one has 4 events spread out into 4 chapters. 3 of the 4, obviously the same 3 in that original Lonely Scroll Adventure Contest single page adventure, and then the third one, the chapter 1 and chapter 3, is actually entirely new, which I actually think is kind of the weakest for different reasons, but we're going to go over those as well. Also, although it's a 50-page product, it's still, the actual adventure itself is only half that. It's only like 25 pages because it has a lot of extra things. It's got a bunch of NPC stat blocks that are included here, which are organized by chapter, which is pretty cool. It also has a ton of player handouts, which is really fun. There's a lot of interactivity for players, which is a huge bonus. And then it's got several pages of maps. Unfortunately, the maps are not great. We do get maps included as separate PNGs and separate PDFs for full-page maps, and they're included here at the end of the document. But they're all basically bare bones, black and white graph paper maps that are technically functional, but we wouldn't really want to use in a VTT or even at the table. And that's a big bummer because taverns is not a hard thing to find if you want to just purchase somebody's map and use that. There's so many great tavern maps that I've seen, and you could have one good tavern map. You might need 2 levels for this entire adventure. Like, that would be a very easy fix to give me just one area, and then you could use that for all your different encounters and events. So unfortunately, it doesn't have to have very good maps. What it does have is a very good Dramatis Personae, which is the section where we go over all the NPCs. And this is part of why this adventure is a little bit leans more towards socialization than, we're not doing any dungeon crawling, but we are carousing with cool pirate figures and classic, tavern drunkards, and we're playing games of darts, we're playing a game of poker, almost kind of a Western-esque also. And they have a lot of really fun characters, and I really love the way that the descriptions are written. This is pretty much right here the perfect example of how to put together a Dramatis Personae, because it has some information, but not too much information. A lot of times you'll get those that have the full-on, personality traits, flaws, bonds, etc., all the way through. That's fine, but oftentimes it's more information than I need. Instead, give me a physical description, and then give me a, emotional description. How do they act, or maybe what are their... and specifically, if you're going to use them really as more of a single scene, maybe what are their wants and likes, and what are they doing here? So like just an example, Hana is the tavern owner. It says, Hana, a young woman with curly black hair cropped close to her head, is the tavern owner of the Snapping Line. She is pleasant and sensible, with an amazing memory for faces, fair and honest, Hana lends. Hana tends to give both her customers and staff the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. That's a great description. That's pretty much all the information I need, and it's right there, easy to read. So really, really great section here. We even get a bunch on the Mimic, which I fucking love this Mimic so much. I like the idea. The way to warm my heart is you use cool fantasy D&D creatures in unexpected ways to really jack with your players and just make it fun. And this is a great example of that, because in this case, the Mimic can transform to various, like at one point it's the podium during the darts game. At another point, it's the little poker table that you're playing poker at. At a later point, it's an armchair. And it just becomes this kind of friendly, goofy thing that you're supposed to be teasing for the players to realize what it is. And it's not hostile at all, and it's literally got like an agreement with these two dwarf brothers that, essentially they might spill beer or feed it a pickle or something, just kind of absorbs it in there and, just kind of hangs out at the tavern. I think that's really fun and a really neat addition in there. So chapter 1 is essentially a game of darts. So again, all of these are basically just events that happen at this tavern. There's a lot of socializing you can do. There are rumors you can pick up, which may actually lead to events further down the line. For example, one of them, you're supposed to meet, you don't necessarily have to meet them, but there's kind of an evil wizard/bard character who's been doing a lot of kind of mad scientist experiments with the Shadowfell and all these things that doesn't even play out till chapter 3, but that character is supposed to be there for chapter 1, and then they leave, and there's another staff member there that also leaves, and then they come into play, later on. So you're kind of building these scenes of connected events that each chapter happens over a different night, which is why I think it would play best if this is a place your players frequent often, and then maybe even between adventures you can run, one of these chapters. So it's really not a traditional adventure you're going to be running. It's more of here's a series of events you can use to expand on this tavern. In this case, it is the what is it called, the Snapping Line tavern in Saltmarsh, but you could do it any kind of piratey themed tavern. The darts competition is really cool. There's a whole rule set for it. There's also really fun handouts used, so you can actually keep track, but you're supposed to roll just dart checks. You can use strength or athletics, and the smart thing is I think all characters actually are proficient with darts, so everybody's can be pretty decent with it. Players can choose to play, they can choose to bet, just get them interacting and having fun. They can choose to play NPCs. There's a whole thing to it, and if it gets out of hand, they can even try to cheat, and they can enter a bar fight. But the whole thing is just this nice little tavern scene. So you can already tell right now, based on this first chapter, if your players are going to enjoy this kind of thing or not. Are they just going to want to go to a tavern and just sleep for the night and wake up and go on the next dungeon crawl? Then that's fine. They're probably not going to be interested in this adventure. But are they really wanting to hang out, let their hair down, do fun things, interact? And this gives them something really fun for them to do, which is the dart game. We can actually go down to the handouts. Oop, there we go. So you can see you get these really cute little handouts where you can keep track of their numbers. There's also, I love this menu that looks like an actual menu where you can order different things, including the tavern specialty of spiked pickles. So I thought that was really cute. Really, really great handouts throughout, honestly. Great components except for the maps, which is unfortunate because that's always the one component I'm looking at most carefully, and the maps are not great. Ladies' Night is a pirate attack, which is also a classic theme for a tavern when pirates come bursting in. Also, again, very western-y, though, too, with just outlaws like bursting in and the whole poker gambling thing. In this case, one of the pirates is actually at the gambling table secretly. You don't know that she's one of these pirate groups. They are the Sea Stars, and they're a group of women pirates, apparently. Their names are great, by the way. Woe Nelly, which is the loudmouthed halfling. Stiletto Sal, which is the one who's secretly in the poker game initially, and then what's the shoot? I forgot the other one. Brass Bell. Brass Bell is the leader, the captain. Great names. So it basically starts off kind of similar to the other one, where you get involved in this game. In this case, it's a game of poker, which I think basically turns out to be mostly a skill challenge with a couple different successes. But the game itself is just kind of the background noise to when the pirates basically show up. They burst down the door. She shoves a dagger in the middle of the poker table and says she's taking, what they want. Now, it is not meant to be a fight to the death, which is important, and that's something usually doesn't come across in D&D too often. Usually you're fighting monsters and you're killing each other. In this case, it specifically says, hey, these pirates will fight. And the rules for D&D is that you can just simply knock somebody unconscious rather than kill them, so you can still use hit points and stuff. But if the players decide to actually, start killing them, then they will absolutely start fighting the players. And it's supposed to be a number of, I think, pirate thugs is the stat block, twice that of the player. So it's meant to be a pretty big, brawl here where the players are, trying to defend. And you can also, make a show of having the Dwarven brothers who are a big part of this adventure. We're kind of the bodyguards. They're, very much comic relief characters. One of them is secretly a were-crocodile, which is pretty fun. And then, of course, you've got that mimic that's also supposed to stay hidden and not be involved too much. So fun stuff so far. I really like those 2 chapters with their events. There's a lot of nice stuff going on. The first chapter, probably no combat. This one, probably mostly combat. And then chapter 3 goes in an interesting direction. It starts off in a really cool investigation, which is, hey, one of our tavern employees named Tull has gone missing, and the bard/wizard who frequently is here and usually puts on a show or something has also not shown up today. Maybe you can look into that. So it starts off with a fun investigation. The players can either follow the tracks if they had happened to leave like that first night to follow where they went, or to go up to that wizard bard's room. And either way, that will kind of trigger what ends up happening here. There's a really neat bit here where the designer clearly knows their spells and things, where Magic Mouth cuts off at one point after 25 words, and then the Animal Messenger will repeat this one spell, but hasn't left yet, but it lasts a certain amount of time because they cast it using a certain spell slot. I'm very impressed with that because I would not have looked up all that information. That part is really cool. The part that kind of tripped me up is that, and by the way, what happened to that Bard Wizard character, Zeph, I believe the name is that the one brother who's a were-crocodile, of course it was a full moon that night, he goes out, he suspects that suspects correctly that the Bard Wizard is an evil person, so he decides to go ahead and take them out, and he does, and that's really not a big mystery, I guess, because the players will... what's weird is that doesn't have anything to do with the actual events in this chapter, though. Like, that's almost incidental, like the fact that Zeph was killed by one of the dwarf brother bodyguards who was a were-crocodile. Instead, what matters more is what happened to the victim, which is Tull, who is in the middle of this crazy, almost Saw-like torture transformation sequence where the Bard Wizard, Zeph, was combining him with another shadow creature and sort of melding them into a shadow monster. And you barge in the door and you're basically seeing this event unfold. There is an interesting puzzle sequence where there's these blocks written in it all has to do with shadows, and literally you have to use shadows as magic. So like the sun is making these words say join on the wall, and that's the way the blocks are spelled out. So there's a kind of a cool way the players have to solve this torture device, or not torture device, but transformation system, by literally using the physical. And it even mentions the fact, hey, if you're at a table, use physical blocks and try to move them around. I thought that was really neat. But none of this has anything to do with the pirate theme, and it really lost me because I really enjoyed finding out what happened to those missing people. And then I was like, okay, are we going to eventually find out one of the brothers is a were-crocodile, and how is that going to work with the social situation? Like, hey, you killed a guy. Like, that's not cool, even if that guy was evil. So, but instead, we don't really get any of that. What we get is just freeing this poor young man from this device magical system that's supposed to combine him with a shadow creature, and it kind of is just basically a fight. You sort of the other, it's a shadow mastiff summons other shadow mastiffs, and you fight it out, and then you're trying to keep him alive because they're conjoined together. So it becomes this interesting little puzzle sequence. It's not a bad event. It is interesting in its own way. But I just thought it really lost me because the first two were so heavily themed around, pirates and gambling and tavern and classic tavern scenes and all this. And this just comes out of nowhere with the whole like, oh, what about the evil wizard bard here happens to be setting up this crazy like hybrid shadow transformation thing. It ends up being kind of really dark and literally and thematically, and just a lot different and more like spellcastery and have to do with the Shadowfell. It doesn't fit with the rest of the book so much. And what's interesting is that's the new one that was added versus the other ones which did come from the original single page adventure. What I would have rather seen is it doubled down on the investigation into the missing person that led to the shocking discovery that one of the brothers is a were-crocodile, and how do the players end up dealing with that, and maybe throw some kind of random encounter in there somewhere. But that would have been a lot more interesting, and then that would have set up this one in a different light, because then it wouldn't be shocking when you find out that one of the brothers has been basically in an accident and fallen to the bottom of the ocean by the docks and is trapped under this giant cannon, and they have to try to free him before he drowns, but he's been down there and he's able to hold his breath for minutes because he's a were-crocodile. So that would be interesting that the players might already have that information. Instead, it's supposed to be a shocker here, and they play it off like, oh, he's a druid, he can probably morph into a crocodile. Whatever. It's still it's a fun event that happens outside of the tavern, and it's just one of those basically challenges where you just throw a problem at the players. You're like, all right, how do you solve this problem? And at this, if the players are average level 8, they probably just have some kind of spells that they can throw out there, even though it's underwater and they're not supposed. The designer makes a point to say they're like 10 feet, 10 feet into kelp, so you can only see them, from 10 feet away, and you're underwater, so that makes spellcasting a little bit more difficult. So I appreciate that it does try to, make it so it's a little trickier than just standing up above the docks and just pointing your finger and freeing them. There are some like diving helmets you're given by the other brother. So it's a fun little challenge where the players have to try to figure out how to free this character who's also a were-crocodile who may accidentally like attack people out of, fear and anxiety, which is kind of a cool challenge. So I like that chapter, but again, that chapter is also from that original single page adventure, so it kind of flows together like similar to the other ones, except for that chapter 3. So in addition, we've got stat blocks for every single of these different creatures by chapter, which is kind of nice. As I mentioned, really, really awesome player handouts, some of the best that I usually see in a lot of these DM's Guild products, including any of the messages you get, the scoreboards for the tavern, just a reminder of how underwater rules work, because when you're trying to free the were-crocodile brother, of course, some sharks show up to, make things a little more complicated in a classic, like, here's a problem, and now I'm going to complicate it way. And then the only bummer is we've got maps that are not great. And it's such a huge bummer because there are so many great tavern maps out there. I've seen so many good tavern maps, and just one good tavern map would pretty much make me happy. One good full color, detailed tavern map would really help elevate this product. And unfortunately, all we get are the bare bones, basic, just kind of black and white graph paper maps. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Quite the Pickle. Dramatis Personae for over a dozen tavern patrons and pirates. Always glad to see an adventure that really cares about its NPCs, and it gives me the correct information and just the right amount of information. Pro area descriptions include lighting, sounds, smells, and other sensory effects. I really didn't talk about this, but because there's not a whole lot of area changes, but when there is, it really does a great job of painting the picture in words of what you're seeing. And that's something that I'm bad about as a DM, because I play on Roll20 so much. My players just look at the art and they can just kind of see what's happening. I don't do a good enough job of describing what things smell like. What do you hear when you walk in, and what are the other, what do things feel like? And this is a really good way of conveying that information, at least to the DM, and then the DM can then try to convey that information to the players in terms of the docks and the open tavern, and then when they get to that weird dude's shadow room, like all that stuff is done very, very well. Pro, average party level adjustments for every encounter. I pretty much always put that as a pro. I just like seeing level scaling a lot in these adventures. It helps a lot. It makes it easier when I'm the DM trying to, change things around with combat encounters. Pro, friendly furniture mimic that communicates via thieves' cant. I love that mimic so much. It's such a fun idea. It was the thing that made me really stop and be like, oh, this is a really cute adventure with the Lonely Scroll Adventure Contest, and I'm glad to see that it was obviously continuing to be used here in the full version. And pro, player handouts for tavern games, scoreboards, menus, and messages. Very, very positive on all the player handouts, and they were very well done. Cons, Chapter 3's events, while interesting, just don't particularly fit the pirate theme. It just felt a lot different than the others, a lot darker, and while I don't necessarily mind the puzzle and the Shadowfell and all that, it just felt like it was part of almost a different adventure versus what the designer was trying to do with all the rest of the adventures here. So it just didn't quite work for me in the context of this adventure specifically. And of course, the other con is the maps. The map quality and art style is not very good, which is a bummer because you could have done just one really good tavern map would have sold it for me. Final verdict, effectively expanding on the single-page adventure from the Lonely Scroll Adventure contest, Quite the Pickle could be run as a series of fun tavern-based events, as well as a flavorful expansion to your party's favorite dockside tavern. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Thomas, Captain Mike, Adam, Aiden, Instant Lose, Smog, Roger, Stan, and Nathan. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, Dave Vicente, Gilberto, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Scalenian, Nick, Farty Butterpants, Blood Angel, Veronis, Baboon, Sean, aka Cert2B, Nathan, and Fast Like a Tortoise. Thank you all very much for your support.